Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Deeply Graphic Design Cast. I'm Nick Longo. Whether you are just starting out your career or you have decades into your career, there's something that we need to embrace, and that's evolution and change. The creative industry is consistently shifting, and if you want to stay relevant, fulfilled, and successful, you have to be willing to take different risks and adapt and pivot, and sometimes take a big leap into the unknown. And that's exactly what we're talking about today with the incredible Jessica Deseo. Jessica has built a really great dynamic career by staying open to change and stepping into new opportunities and continuously evolving as a creative professional. In this episode, we'll chat about unique things like how to navigate your career shifts, embrace new endeavors, and future-proof yourself in this ever-changing industry. So whether you are just feeling stuck, or you're looking for some inspiration, or just curious about what's next for the creative world, this episode is for you. So let's jump right in.
Okay.
I love it. I love it. Well, hey, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, because this is your first time on the podcast, but we've spoken many times.
Yes.
Tell everybody about yourself, Jessica.
So I am a creative and an entrepreneur a bit, I would say. And my background's in packaging, and I went to design school I started design school 23 years ago and then graduated 20 years ago, I want to say. So I've been around and I've seen it change and evolve, and I've done a lot of behind the scenes of design, and my career has taken such a crazy path, and I kind of do a little bit of everything. I like the token multi-hyphenate because I think that's what I am.
That's a new one.
Yeah, I'm a multi-hyphenate creative, and I think it really defines who I am. And I'm really excited to chat and kind of see where this conversation goes.
I know. It's a good one because change is really good. And I think a lot of people don't realize, we were just talking earlier, and so many young designers think they have to have their path figured out completely before they've even entered the job market. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like, I think the best thing, particularly I think the creative industry has better than anything, is an unknown path and so many opportunities that those things can come your way, right?
Yeah, exactly. I got this really great piece of advice just recently.
Yeah.
And someone told me they said, you need to do what the industry asks of you, not necessarily try to define yourself, because you have so many different skills. Yeah, it was such great advice. I've given it all the time. So, and it really sticks with people. And I think it stuck with me as well, just because I went to her for advice, and that's what she gave me. She's like, stop trying to figure out things. It'll just wait, see what is needed of you, because you have so many different skill sets. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll just do that. And I have been doing that. And within that, I've discovered, kind of what I want to do and what direction I want to take. But I as you do different opportunities and things that seem risk taking and entrepreneurship, it's and then you start meeting people that have different outlooks on things as well, and meeting designers that want to invest into products or want to design their own product. You start realizing that we all have different skill sets and nothing is very linear. I told you earlier, your career can go like this and it's totally fine.
Isn't it funny? Just when you thought you figured it out, you still get some really good advice from folks.
Yes.
I know. I think that's another thing about just being open to hearing what others are going to tell you, younger or older, right? Sometimes it's so surprising where the amazing insight comes from nowadays. I got one of my students said something the other day that was just so crazy. It's like, with all this AI and everything, it's like, who asked for everything to speed up and be done so fast? Yeah. She's like, was it us, or is it technology telling us we got to be faster? And I was like, the best question ever.
Truly the best question ever. I tell my students too at Art Center, so I teach their Pack 2, and I tell them, I go, you're in this really great time of your career in your life, because I do find that design school is a career path as well. That's where it sort of starts, and you make really big connections at that point. I tell them, I'm like, your brain is so fresh. You have not gone through heartbreak as much as most people do when you're older.
Yeah.
You know, you haven't had, like, you're just in this really great spot. And I'm like, now is the time to really ask yourself questions and explore and do. And I love seeing how they think and what they say. And to your point, like advice as well. You know, for me personally, it was really hard to get advice. And this, you know, design is very crit based, and that was really hard for me to take on early on as a designer. But now it's like I crave people to give me advice and crit and all of that. And I love when I work with clients and they're like, no, we really need you to tell us like what this looks like. Like, please tell me if this is the right. And those are some really great people to work with because they're really open to feedback. And I think really great constructive crits are great too. And so I always love working with people that are open to like advice and listening. And like I said, that piece of advice that I got was because I was seeking it to this person. And actually, I'll name drop her. Her name is Elise, and she's like a marketing mentor. And she's if you don't follow her on LinkedIn, she's great. And so I reached out to her and I was like, I need some advice on my career path. And she said, yeah, let's talk. And so she's great. But yes, to your point, students are great. I love them. They're so young and fresh and have such great things.
I'm going to use that line. Your brains are so fresh.
Fresh. They're fresh.
Like, it hasn't been hurt. It hasn't been, you know. And I maybe you've seen this too. I've had a lot of students recently be really upfront and saying, tell me the truth. Like, give me the harsh critique. And I think because there was a time where I think we were maybe getting a little too soft. We were maybe a little bit too afraid to kind of like push the envelope a little bit. Everyone's participating, you know, that whole genre. And now it's like, I love that even in my graphics 1 class, I had a young girl ask me day one, she's like, don't hold back. Like, even if it's just one-on-one, I was like, whoa, like
the tides are turning.
I was just clapping, you know, it's so funny. You know, but coming back from you leaving school, going into your career, did you always envision yourself in the career you're at now? Or would you say this was just a series of pivots and evolutions that could not be planned?
I think it was a lot of pivots and evolutions that cannot be planned. Definitely there. I don't think anyone plans. I love design. And when I started my career, there was just like, it was so direct. Like, you do graphic design and print was a big component back then. And I went into packaging and I loved it. But I had a hard start because of the constructive criticism and clients and your creative director and, you know, all of that. That was really tough for me. And everybody's at their own pace. Sometimes you're just like, is this the career I want to take? And then being female as well was really tough. Like, you want to get into as you start getting, you know, more and more into your career, you become a senior designer, and then you're like, well, I want to be an art director, a creative director. And you start getting there, you start realizing the spots are really limited. And at the time I was like, well, I have never worked with a female creative director ever. So that was really hard to kind of see. I think it's so different now. It's very different. So I didn't really see myself, and I'm like, maybe those opportunities aren't really there for me. And then I'm in college. I met Andrew, who's the founder of Dyeline, and he had really skyrocketed that website, and we had worked together side by side for a lot of years as packaging designers, and but to come on board and to help grow the business, and it untapped a side of what I know how to do, which was entrepreneurship and how to grow a small business and how to really run one. So that was really eye-opening, like to be able to see and use your creative mind for creative business ideas, that if I would have gone to my own and opened a studio, my friend, I think I would have been able to use those same skill sets. And now having my own business, I'm like, no, I know how to creatively do things.
I am a creative, damn it.
Yeah, I have a creative mind here. Like, I can get creative. And I think that's when designers decide to launch on their own, you really you start realizing how much less and less you do creative, and you're more and more running the business.
Yeah.
And unless you hire I call it the adults in the room, which is like a really good accountant and a really good attorney to look at contracts and set things up. But yeah, it untapped this like whole other world, and we were still in the design and packaging world. So we were just more talking about it and looking at design and expressing it and being able to give that back to the community, which was really cool. And meeting so many different people and so many different studios, not just in the US, but globally. So that was really great to see. And then seeing the trends of the packaging world and the design world and how it was changing. I think by like 2016, 2017, sustainability started to become a really, really important topic. And one that continues to be incredibly important just because we're living in a society where sustainability is like very real. We're feeling it, like things are really happening. So that was really great to like tap into that and start learning about sustainability and how it impacts design. And then print, as you know, the only component to print kind of left. I used to do a lot of catalog work and packaging work, but catalogs are kind of non-existent.
Yeah.
But packaging is still very existent. So learning how to send something to print, I think, is now becoming like less and less, but more, but very important because packaging still is
especially when someone's sending me a text going, "How do I export a Canva file?" I'm like, no, you just don't. That's not going to print.
That's not going to print. That's,
no. And
low res.
printers have these signs now that say, "We do not accept Canva files." Like I think it's hilarious.
People use Canva for packaging? I've never even...
Not even that. It's just like to print the brochure or whatever. People just know it's going to be like a printer knows it means that's not an experienced designer in most cases. Okay, I know plenty of people using that software and they're killing it. Or it's like it wasn't set for print, so it's like RGB. There's no bleeds, and everything bleeds off of the document. So it's more that like it means it's a more inexperienced person that's never set anything up for print. Whereas if you got it in Illustrator or in something in design, that printer could make some quick things because they know how to use those apps. So it just causes a lot of frustration.
Yes.
Which I get.
Yeah.
It's a whole curveball.
It's a whole thing. I know Canva's interesting. It's like it's a great tool, but I'm like, that's made, like when I see things on social, I'm like, that's made in Canva. Like it has a Canva aesthetic to it, which I find now very interesting, where it's like you can spot when something is Canva. And it goes back to what I tell my students a lot too, is like, you have to be proprietary. Sometimes like you just can't, you have to make it your own. How does this stand out that way? So it's interesting, but it's interesting that they're trying to send things to print on Canva. That's funny.
Yeah. It's like, like their big thing is design for all. And it's like, yeah, that's awesome. But you would never say like, plumbing for all. And then suddenly you're a plumber because you use some simple app. It's like, I think to most designers, we know that like, hey, I've fired it up and I've used it a few times on a few things for presentations and stuff. It has some really great advantages. But it's just one of those things where it's kind of like, there are the tools of the trade. And I think most of us as designers, just staying true to industry standards and also looking at new and upcoming things is a great balance, in that way. Because again, with so much changing in it, and we'll probably chat a little bit more about that. I wanted to ask you, do you think was the die line that moment where it kind of, you embraced change, like maybe for the first time, that you were really like, whoa, who knew I'd go into this weird world of...
Yeah.
By the way, best resource in history. I've used it every day of my career since the day I found it. So big thanks to you guys for it. And I'm sure a lot of our audience is in the same boat.
That's really sweet. I know the longevity of it, and it's so great. And I loved that I love that it is a resource for so many. It was crazy to get into digital media. That's essentially what it was, and what it transformed to, and the competition and all the conferences and being able to give so many people so many resources. That was really cool to do. And then with that opportunity, meeting people, and then print magazine became something that came to us, and being able to restart that really long historic like staple in graphic design. And that was really fun, and having Debbie and Steve and some other partners involved that were really heavy in the industry, and being able to kind of relive that was cool, and being able to use what I knew about entrepreneurship and design and like input it into print. And then recently when I left Dieline, I got back into the design world, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to go back and work with the creatives and work with the creative people. And that's been really amazing to see clients and see people, how, the world is changing with so much technology, but the process of getting a client, the process of presenting, the process of, like doing the work and the timelines and the systems that you have, those are still original and still very much what has to happen in order to like do the work. Maybe it's now different because it's so much faster, but it's still, you still have to come up with creative ideas. You still have to put them on paper. You still have to figure it out.
Those principles never die. Like those things that, like, it's so weird too. And I'm sure you and I can chat forever about even how AI is coming into to education and everything. That's still one of those things that it boggles my mind, and I'm using it. It's hard to teach. It's hard to like still fathom, and it's getting better and better like every day. But it is a change that I feel like, what's your thought on kind of, because since change is the topic and that's such a huge one, all of these things, anything that comes in that's new tech, new tools, how do you stay ahead of it without like instantly having an opinion and feeling a little bit overwhelmed on it? Are you welcoming to it to just try it out?
Yes, I'm welcoming to it, but I'm also a little hesitant as well. I go back to the being proprietary. Like that's huge in our industry, like intellectual property and having a proprietary design, all of it those are big things that you have to have, AI is open, Midjourney, unless you have the little robot machine for yourself, like it's open to everyone.
Yeah.
And so that's really scary to think. And then the aesthetic of it all, like I said, with Canva, like I'm like, that's a Canva like setting or template. Preset. Yeah, exactly. So, I think there's those designers, and then there's the principles and and what you learn in school, where you have to actually have a creative idea and it's yours and it's and with designers, some designers start creating an aesthetic to what they do, and that's theirs. Essentially, that's what we're doing with client work. When they come to us, it's like you have to create a proprietary idea. So that I don't think is ever going to change, because I don't think an AI robot's going to be able to give that to you. But how we use it and how people use it and how I think this conversation about technology is tough because we don't know. Yeah. So when we don't know something, we get scared. We immediately get scared and frightened of it. Sometimes I go on and off. I go positive of like, oh wow, these tools help us create really easy things and quickly, and like I relate it back to the days of, if you ever watched Mad Men in their art department, where they're like scoring things and putting layers, which is now what layers is in Photoshop.
Yeah,
and
when mechanicals. Mechanicals back in the day. I know.
Yes.
Oh, it's crazy.
And our Photoshop has layers now, and that was crazy when we started, and then now what it's become. So I see it that way, but then I also see the other side of it, where it's like, where is this going to go, and how does it happen?
I think most people are in that exact same boat, and it's like same thing. We had a long, in-depth conversation about it the other night, and it was like I was taking the role of defending it, and then there's many times I take the role of saying no, it's got to. I'm against it. But the one thing I was talking about was, before desktop publishing and before the computer became our canvas, that's exactly it. And you can watch any old episode of Mad Men and see what took us, 8-9 hours, we're now doing in the matter of minutes because of that. So that process happened. This is a version of AI that came in. If you wanted to ink a square or a key line around something for the artwork you're doing, you had to ink it, right? You had to ink it on vellum, you had to crop the corners and everything. Now you're just dragging a box. So in some ways, we are already using digital as a full advancement, right? Now you look at AI and go, this is too fast, too big of a leap. I want to think of it the same way as that, but then I struggle with it the same way you did because of ethics and things like that.
Yes, I struggle with the proprietariness of it all and the ideas, and they're not going to give you the idea. You have to come up with it. How you execute, I think, is the question, right? Like how you execute that idea is going to be how you differentiate yourself. And, to your point too, like even with packaging, my first job as a packaging designer was with the gourmet gift company, and they had a whole department would cut up die lines, and the amount of die lines that I would create and I'd have to send to someone to cut up to mock, and how many times it would be wrong, and how many things I learned about like
engineering.
Okay. Yeah, the substrate is the cardboard flute of this size. I have to give a 16th inch on my die line. And those like little things, I don't think I'd ever learn unless I knew someone was cutting it up for me and I could put it together and understand it. So now there's programs where you just plop it in and they kind of
adjust
do
the
it.
die line for you.
Yep.
So it's a shame that a young designer won't have that overlay in their education, because it's a matter of understanding, and you know what I mean. And it's like there's so many things now that are just an option click or whatever away that used to be a lot of math, or remember the proportion wheel that you'd have to like figuring out the percentage of something because you were Xeroxing it down to match a certain size, and that just won't happen any longer. And I want to embrace that, because look, it's gonna happen, and I don't want to be that last person on the line going, I'm fighting for it.
No, you can't do that.
But I don't want to be the first person that embraces it too. So we're screwed either way.
It's a tough one. And, I've worked with even the Adobe programs. I've gotten some like really behind the scenes of Adobe Firefly and how those things work. Amazing. And it's insane. It's crazy. But I also see some of the limitations it has. And it's like, that's like,
a good thing. Isn't that great? Because it kind of makes you feel like, oh, okay, I got that. You don't got it. Like I'll take it from here, like in a lot of ways, right? Yeah. And so like even in brainstorming, even for backgrounds, like one of the things we were using it for is when the students were doing their packaging for a beautiful background, kind of like supporting the brand and everything else, instead of finding stock photography or whatever, we were making fake backdrops in Firefly. And I feel a little bit better using that. That's the only one we use generative in class, because obviously it's tapped into Adobe stock and feels a little bit more ethical. And there's ways to find that, like, how is it a tool in addition to what you get to do, but don't lose sight of the human touch of what you bring as the creative. I think we're just going to be conductors in the future.
Yeah, I know. And I think, and we're not the only industry impacted by it either. So it's just, when you don't know the unknown, it's just tough sometimes it's hard to keep positive, but I know I'm trying really hard to keep positive.
Great segue, because the next question, so many people are fearful of making changes or stepping into any kind of new territory. What advice do you have for designers to just not be too hesitant and to, look into new skills, maybe even smaller sections of the industry, the way you kind of even said, like, whoa, that's not the right path. I was supposed to go to a design job and now I'm going here. Yeah. How do you stay open to those things and embrace it?
I think it really does take a personality to get into to do risk taking. I do think it's like a risk. Like, it's nice to sometimes just be like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what I do, and I don't want to stay out of that. But so much changes around us that it's like sometimes if you leave that job or something's happened to that, like you want to understand your skill set and see if you can pivot into something else. And I think it just takes like a mindset of being able to be a risk taker and be like, I think I can do that. Like I really can. I've met so many amazing people that have a design background, but they're really great at writing. So they've done like copywriting or strategy within the design world, and they just sort of pivot because they're like, I love design and I understand it, but I just don't want to. I call it pixel push, and that's how I felt too. I'm like, I don't want to pixel push like that anymore. So, everyone has like different skill sets that you can still utilize within the industry. I've seen a lot of people pivot into, creative strategy or creative operations or creative, like just doing something else that's not really the typical creative job. And I think that's really great too. If you think you can have that opportunity and try it, and you can get your foot into doing that, I think that's really great. And that's happened to me where it's like, I've met so many people and they're just like, you're really great at this and you're really great at that. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so then they just sort of put me into these roles. And in between the timeline of like Dieline and print, we had a year where where the magazine was still around for How Magazine. And I worked on the magazine for a year and like publishing it. It was print design, so I was really familiar from my catalog work from the past. And, printing, you could only print divided by 4, like all of those like little things that you think about. Yeah.
Pagination.
So, pagination, exactly. So I had the opportunity to do that, and it was really, my role there was really being like a creative producer. So it was just like contacting people, making sure and having that type of role, and alongside like creative, not directing necessarily, but helping with the creative team. Because it would take a lot of people, like a writer, an art director, the creative director, and then myself. And it's like, if I didn't know how, because no one on the team really knew how to get something to print. And I was that one person. Wow. So it was really exciting. I'm like, well, you have to have the pagination by 4, and like, we have to do this. And we would always have to know the page count before we went to print. So that dictated also what we were going to put inside the magazine. And that was a really fun time. I knew from my work from catalog work too, I knew photographers. So we were able to start off with a really strong photographer who was a good friend of mine, and is so talented. His name is Aaron Okayama, and he's just like an incredible photographer. But you just never know, like the little things that I never knew when I worked in-house doing catalog work for Speedo was the brand that I worked with. Like I never knew that would transition to like, I never thought that we would ever get the magazine to do it for a year, and like how that skill came into play, and just everything. So you never know the paths you take, how it helps in the future, but everything you're doing is for a purpose. That's for sure. Yeah.
You mentioned having these opportunities. What kind of skills do you think the creatives today must have to not only just succeed, but to be adaptable for when an opportunity does come that has a little bit of a change? What are some of those, even soft skills, those things that are, outside of just our industry?
Yeah. Soft skills are, that's a tough one. And especially with my students.
How much time do you spend in class talking about soft skills, right?
Oh my God. Whew. I know. All and time. It's so tough. But with my students, it's like presenting. That's been huge. Like every time they present their work each week, it's like a digital presentation. They have to work through the slides, and sometimes they'll be like, how many slides do I need? I'm like, endless. Some people just, when they present, they're like, and then this, and they're going. I'm like, it depends how you present. You can have 200 slides, or you can have 45. I don't know. It's to how you talk.
If you're going like this, maybe 80.
Yeah. But if you're just talking and going, it might be 200 slides. Yeah, I don't know. We don't know. But I think soft skills are so rare these days, and they're so tough, and it's also risky because your real personality has to come out. And I have seen creatives like sort of not super junior, but like on creative sets, like on a photo shoot, that really does require for you to like step up and start directing. Mm-hmm. And it can be really intimidating. And so soft skills, I think, are the most important thing you can leave away from design school is being able to feel comfortable presenting and talking about your work. I think when you get to start working, when you start working in your field or whatever you decide to do in design, you're eventually going to want to update your portfolio, and you're going to have to do interviews, and you're going to have to talk about your work. I tell my students all the time, you have to leave this class with a significant case study about how you came up with this concept.
Yeah.
I would
That's
say
the new standard, 100%.
yes, new standard. And talking about your work is so important, being familiar with it, using the terminology that's necessary, and feeling comfortable with it. And asking the right questions, like during crits and things like that. But if you're too shy, it's fine to be shy, but it's not fine to be shy when you need the help to get there. And that's what design school's for, to kind of set you up for that. Because when you get into the real world and get into design studio, your creative director is going to give you that feedback, and you can't be intimidated by that. It's an environment where you must ask the right questions. To take that feedback, because it's real work and it's with a client, and everybody needs to understand your concept and how you're presenting and what you're doing. So I would say the biggest thing I see with students is the presenting and communicating about your work. COVID really did a number to that generation in college. I think they were so comfortable behind the laptop in your home and everything, as opposed to being in a classroom and with your peers face to face is a whole different thing.
Yeah, I think we're still reeling in that, you know. I don't know what's the fix. Like,
I know.
Some things I realize is like those little soft skills, and maybe you and I are probably more lucky that we got them. Maybe we didn't need them so much when we left school, and you get them in your first few years, or if you're just a sponge. And you might work with someone and go like, whoa, they're so confident when they present, or whoa, how did that person negotiate a better salary, or whatever it might be, right? All those little soft skill things. So I almost feel it's unfair to the younger group, or anyone that's even 2-3 years out of school and into their real job. If they're hybrid and not in an office and not amongst a lot of people, how do they practice these things? How could they, it's like, I almost think like make a checklist of the things you feel you're weak at, and do it. Film yourself presenting and see how you do, right?
Yeah.
It's so true.
It's so true. And I also think if you're one of those workers, which I am, I work from home, but it's like a different,
But you had your office. You have your foundation.
Yeah. If you work from home or you're hybrid, I think it's really important to get engaged with the community, go to events, get into AIGA, go to conferences. You'll never know the feeling of going to a conference for a couple of days and seeing so many people present and being like, wow, that person really knows how to talk about their work, and getting that face to face and seeing it, you're impressed by those things. So my biggest encouragement is to do it. And if your company doesn't pay for you to go, I think it's still important to just try to at least go to a couple events a year and experience that, and then engage with other people, because those are the other skills, right? You never know what's meeting someone else at a networking event, how that's going to impact you. I've learned that firsthand of just going and meeting people, and they become colleagues at some point, or you have a freelance, you work on a project or whatever it is. And the last, I would say, few years have all just been part of my network of just attending events and going and meeting people and following up with them and connecting them with them on LinkedIn and, all of that. So the better you go out and expose yourself, it's great.
It's like, I like that whole idea of diving right in. It's, you might as well, and sometimes go by yourself. I think sometimes is the best, because you'll have to, it's a sink or swim thing. And if it's just you might spark up that conversation with someone. You might just reach out and say hey, we should connect, or whatever it might be. Because it's very easy if you've been doing it for a long time and you've been to a few conferences. But you're right, and there's smaller ones. You don't have to just look at the big ones. Just get that under your belt and feel really comfortable in having those moments where you are networking and you don't even know you are. That's
Exactly.
right. That's the best point.
Yeah, and it's hard. People are shy. Their designers are like introverts for sure. But guess what? You're in a room full of different of all introverts. So you're right in your circle, you know?
Yeah. What do you think of personal branding and like for a younger creative or someone that's, how important is the visual and how important is the reputation? Because I think they go hand in hand. I think a lot of people just talk about personal brand as what your logo is or whatever. I see it as like who you are to work with, what's the reputation following you and all that. How do you build your personal brand to be successful?
I know. It's like it's so basic, right? It's so common.
You're like, guys, here's the secret.
It's just be nice, right? Okay. I think it's just always be nice and always be kind. And even when someone's unkind, still be kind. Because I've been in situations where, people have like, I've been in a lot of different situations and I'm like, okay, I can just forget it and be kind and move on with my life. I think that's, and we're all learning because there have been times where I've messed up and I've been like, whoops, shouldn't have done that. But as I get older, I'm a little bit more like, okay, like that's not on me, that's them. I cannot control that. I can control what I say. I think, so someone emails you about something or following up, always email them back. If you don't get to it and then you remember, be like, oh my God, I forgot to email you back. It's been crazy. I think everybody understands those things.
Yeah.
I think being responsive, I think being kind, I think those things are great. Recently, I met with someone, like a client for some work, and we had been introduced a year prior. And we were trying to connect and then it didn't happen. And it just kind of was like, okay, it's not the right time. And then she met with someone else and then my name came up again, but in a positive way. And then she's like, God, that name sounds so familiar. And then when she went to go email me, she was like, I've already spoken with this person, but I
have emails from you.
I have emails. We tried to connect. And I'm like, right. But it was two separate people connecting her to me, and both people in such a positive way. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm doing something right. And I'm taking my own advice about being positive and being kind and a good person, and just like always do that because you have to. And this industry is so small. I swear it is. Like it's, everyone knows each other in some way, and it's a lot smaller than you think. So,
yeah. I mean, it's so funny too, because I think right as I think when we had Fred Hart on the podcast, and then we had Tavern, and I think that's when you kind of reached out and were like, hey, we haven't talked in a while, but like, I have someone perfect for you. I'm like, I'm already booked him. like what a small world, right? Like,
yes.
Because it's like, again, like and I'm like, no, duh, should these people like know each other? Like, I get it. Like, I know we're all in this packaging, branding world and everything, and it's so neat. That's my favorite part of this whole thing. And I think, like you said, when you got involved with Dieline, this world of your networking just probably automatically exploded just because of where you were sitting. And I think the podcast is the same thing. It has that same kind of opportunity to meet these folks. And if you don't join a #1 blog or start a podcast, there's thousands of other ways to keep your networking alive. It's literally the life force in so many different ways. Just being able to tell someone, I got someone for you, or I know exactly who you should talk to, right?
Yeah.
Don't you want to be that? I love being that in between, because I know I'm going to need it one day, and I want someone in my network to be able to do the same.
Yes, yeah, and I love people who are generous with their advice and their connections. Like if you have know people and you start feeling comfortable, I don't think anyone's going to reject. Like, hey, do you have like 15 minutes to talk to me because I would love some advice, or I saw this article that you wrote, or this work that you did. I'd just love to like connect with you. I think people are so open to that. And you can't be shy. The one thing I say all the time, I'm like, the worst thing is to say no. And you're back where you were. Yeah. So that's fine.
Yeah.
It just takes a lot of guts, and sometimes that's tough to do. I've been fortunate enough to like meet some really key great people who have connected me, and then I've connected them, and it goes in round and round and round, and
it's mutual.
I love it. And so those people are the best kind of people to have around. And I've been fortunate enough to meet some good ones.
Oh, that's great. And isn't it neat when someone you admire or whatever, and then next thing you know, you're doing a good solid for them.
Yes.
You're like, where did that happen?
Yeah. I'm like, oh, the karma. I hope I have some like karma bucks with me because
Karma bucks.
Yeah.
I know. I'm such a fan of it, and I think we push that all the time. Is anything you can do to kind of expand on that? I think LinkedIn's made it so easy too that it's kind of this virtual, never-ending conference that allows you to kind of keep that, and if you're not getting a chance to go, there's your arena to reach out, to make that quick little connection. And even like you said, I think it's made it easier for someone to offer the help, and it's made it a lot easier for someone to ask for the help, because it's so, once you're in the bubble, like it's a quick message. I don't know it's so interesting how that DM, the messaging on LinkedIn is so different from everywhere else because of the professional overlay that LinkedIn has.
Right. Right.
It feels easier.
Yes. A few years back, I loved about I feel like students should do this more often, but a few years back, it was like springtime and they were looking for a summer internship, and they approached me and they were like, I wanted to know, well, I saw that you are connected to this person on LinkedIn and Instagram, and they have an agency in New York, and I'm willing to go to New York for the summer to go intern with them. And I was wondering if you could give me an intro and like give a good word of mouth. And I was like, listen, yes. The fact that you have gone through all of this and have done, that's not creepy. That's actually amazing. Right? Yes.
So absolutely. Proactive.
So proactive. I was like, good for freaking you. Yes, absolutely. And then I was like, I will give you a letter of recommendation and intro you. So I love that. And recently another student of mine graduated last spring, and I really loved her, and I love her a lot. She's really talented, and I connected her with some freelance work, and then she interviewed with somebody, and then that somebody and I worked together a long time ago for a beauty packaging company. And then she's like, do you know this? And I was like, yes, it's my former student. She's like, oh, she was talking about you. And I was like, 5-star review. And then she ended up getting the job. And I'm like, yes, you have to continue. Even in school, your instructors are network. This whole thing is like starting of your career. So like I said, I love when people are proactive and take initiative. There's no one is ever going to think that's weird or creepy or whatever. No.
I know. It's like the gate is open, walk right in. In fact, like we would embrace that. Like it's so rare. Isn't it so like, again, effects of maybe COVID and other things. When that happens, you're like, oh, yes.
Yeah, I love that.
I can make a connection to you. Yes. It's so cool. I love that. What do you think as far as emerging opportunities? So what do you see in the horizon if someone is thinking of the change or doesn't know what's even like available? Do you see any emerging opportunities different from like just to help kind of understand there's something different out there, or somewhere there's not a lot of people are looking at right now in the industry,
I mean, I think designers should look at themselves as entrepreneurs. I think they have the ability to, if you've got an idea, the amount of designers that I know that are like, I am going to reinvent. I have a friend who reinvented the shower cap, and she made it luxury. She's like, I'm going to reinvent it, and did amazing branding, amazing packaging, and amazing everything. And she was now an entrepreneur with a creative mindset. Nice. And the amount of other designers that I know that are like, I've invested into this like alternative popcorn, and I did the branding for it, and with the inventor of the pot, and like it's growing, like, or I decided to do, when it was really hot, to do non-alcoholic, the amount of people that I knew that invested into non-alcoholic and designed it. I think like look at opportunities. If you're kind of just like doing your work and you find a startup and they are like, well, we don't have a lot of money. I've seen a lot of people just go, I'll invest my design, but I want in on the product. I think it just gives us an excitement of like, I kind of own something, and it's exciting. That I think is something people do talk about it, but you got to be open to it and want to do it. I always think being on top of sustainability and like the ever changing of that, and innovation and products and not products, but materials and things that are different. looking at sustainable packaging and, where that's all going. I think that's always going to be something that on the pulse.
Yeah.
And having that mindset too of that sustainability is real, and it may never come across your desk with a brand or a client because sustainability is hard to do.
It's expensive.
It's expensive. It's hard. It's hard to get approved. It's tough. It's an uphill battle, but having the mindset of understanding it is cool, and important for the industry. I also think like I said, like going the alternate route, like if you're tired of pixel pushing and you're like, I could do creative strategy. I'm a really great writer. I have this skill set, untap it and go into something else and try it out. But emerging trends right now, it definitely is technology. So it's hard to tell like what this all means for all of us. I'm like,
going to be new on Monday.
Yeah, I'm like, it goes faster. I saw a video of something where it's like two AI robots talking to each other, and they started going beep 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 beep, and
with the two phones, I think it was. Yeah, I know. It was like, only a matter of time before someone put those. And that's the scary part is when it's AI to AI, you're kind of like, wait a minute, I still have a role here.
Yes, like, oh my gosh,
that's going to be strange. But
I know.
I love what you put together about the entrepreneurial creative, because I think, again, that's something that might come into someone's path years later. And I think pushing someone to do that earlier is such a great idea. Like, if someone's, like, I remember the first time a client came to me with that, I had the biggest imposter syndrome ever, because I'm like, I'm not that guy. Like I've never, like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't a share in the company or whatever. It was so scary. But then it was like, wait a minute. It's just a little bit of a gamble, but it's also, look at the bright side. It's another new thing I could put in the portfolio and the website and everything else that's out of my typical world. And what if it does do well?
Yeah.
It's like, and that gives you that entrepreneurial spirit as well. So it's a little addicting once that happens. Now I'm like, who's next?
Yeah.
Right.
And I once met with a designer and he's like, yeah, I've done that before, but it's just a roll of the dice. It is a gamble. And he's like, maybe it doesn't come out, but it's kind of nice to do. And you're somewhat invested. So sometimes you do the design, you go kind of above and beyond for it. Yeah. And you kind of have to evaluate risk. You just don't do it willy-nilly, obviously, but it's kind of nice to have those opportunities, and you just never know what's going to happen. I guess coming out of this conversation, I'm like, I'm a risk taker, but like it's not that I come across that way. I just think sometimes imposter syndrome can take over, but I think if you just you're like, no, I can do this. I know I can. And don't let those voices get into you. Like, just be like, yeah, why not? Why can't I do it?
Why not me?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know, because we're the first to get envious when we see someone else getting it. Yes. But then when that opportunity comes to us, I think you're right. It's like so many of us, I never thought I was a risk taker. Never, ever did I ever. And I think once you do kind of shatter imposter syndrome a little bit and test the waters in something, then then I'm like, oh, maybe I am a little bit of a risk taker here. I never knew until I said yes to something,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I really admire podcasts and people that do them. It is kind of a bit of a work, like recording, scheduling, asking, meeting the people and having conversations and getting the questions. Like, I admire what you do and everything. So I think even then it's like what you said about networking. It's like really meeting a lot of people and having great conversations and keeping things lively. That's tough.
Yeah, I agree. I use it as my intro. It's so wonderful. And then it allows us to have these great conversations and little things that I think we all struggle with, but sometimes you just need to hear someone being transparent about it. And you gave me another great segue. What podcasts or books or resources, YouTube channels, anything do you find relevant for creatives who want to kind of take that next step and maybe expand a little bit?
Yeah, I do think that it's funny because Mike, who was on your podcast, Perry, we talk about we're like, oh, the last thing I want to do is design stuff outside design, but So whatever your hobbies are, like still do that because I think it's so relevant
Yeah.
to your research and all of that. So like I really love I'm gonna really get very personal here, but I love
Go.
like reality TV and Bravo, and I think that's really funny and so culturally relevant, and it always plays into anything with like a client or something where like
Pop
that's
culture.
pop culture. It's so very
Yeah.
into pop culture. Love that. Even from like the Perez Hilton blog days, I'm like so like I would refresh because I wanted to know more. So very into that. But in regards to design, I'm gonna have a shout out to my partner Debbie Millman, who's on print. Like her podcast is the best, and the way that she has transitioned from design to like lifestyle and his, like people that are really important in the industry and overall culture as well. I love that. So she's been able to really transition her podcast into something so much bigger that I love to listen to that. I love, all the design blogs are great. Like Armin's is an incredible. I love his hot takes. Obviously your podcast. I love listening to design podcasts when they're great. They're super, super fun to listen to. And then I love going to events. Those are the biggest things. Like next week I'm going to Expo West, which is really fun. Yeah.
What day are you going? Do you know?
I live super close, so I'm going like pockets of time. So like a little bit on Wednesday, a little bit this, a little bit that.
I'll be there on Thursday. We'll definitely connect.
We'll connect.
Yeah.
We'll connect.
I'd love for you to meet some of my students. I'm bringing about 10 students.
Oh, fun!
Yeah.
That's such a great.
For those of you guys know, Expo West is like the world's biggest nutritional supplement, food, drink, lifestyle thing, and it is a packaging designer's Disneyland, right?
Yes.
It's the
for
best.
food and bev and wellness. It's great. It's great
So
to see
good.
innovation, to see all of it. It's really cool. So I love that. I love going to events like that. I love going to like a Adobe Max. I think that one I have to mentally prepare because I'm like, there's 7 million people here, and I'm like, but it's a lot. It's a lot to go through and a lot, but you do get the latest and greatest of like what is out there, and I think more important than ever now to see what and you can take like a workshop and like see how it all works out. I love Armin's conference. I go to a brand new conference every year, which is a great one, and that's a little not as intense and it's really big, and speakers
and it gets so niche too. I love how the first concept one and all the other ones, it's like it's so neat that he's taken very small areas of our kind of everyday and turned it into such a big production,
Yeah, exactly. So I do a lot of that, and then I do a lot of I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, I subscribe to the Atlantic, I subscribe to all of those things. I think understanding where the world is an understanding of design as well. So I love to keep up to date with all of those things, and especially with like sustainability and that type of work that I do. I'm like, however the world is at is going to impact how this is and how it keeps going down the rabbit hole of how it all comes back to design.
You got to live a life. I think that's the other thing. We can get so glued to the screens and everything else that we're not actually out there experiencing. And here we are, we're the people putting together, hopefully the next generation of good stuff and everything out there. And sometimes it's funny when you have a really cool niche, like you were saying with what you watch or whatever it might be, when you can make that connection with a possible new client or a new introduction, and you have a shared value, it's the best thing ever. Like I just love having that. Look, oh yeah, I've been there before, and you're like, whoa, that's an interesting little like
take.
And it's a confidence to whoever is on the other side of that to be like, oh, maybe this is the right person to discuss this further with.
Exactly.
The more you know.
Like, your interests outside of design are just as important as your interests of design.
Yeah.
And like 2 years ago, I had never held a tennis racket, and I was like, I'm going to learn tennis. And now it's the one thing that I go outside twice a week. And I am like, it has nothing to do with screens. It has nothing to do with design. And I'm like learning a new skill. But, like, it's just a great, like, things that you can do outside of design will inspire you as well. So I'm a big proponent of that and getting outside of the screen and having that type of discipline.
Balance in so many different ways, right?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
love it. I love it. Well, where can people find you? How can they connect with you?
I know. So Instagram, I have Jessica Deseo. And then I also have like a one called at Packaging Professor. So handle where I showcase my students' work. So you should go there if you're looking for talent.
We should have a competition.
Yes,
I
yes.
love it.
I should feature more like outside of what my students and outside of Art Center. I should feature like other people's work. And maybe I should do that.
You know what's great too is Adobe's had a few of those moments where the students from all the different schools, particularly here in LA, got to meet each other. And it was wonderful. I think there were a bunch of Art Center students at one last year that was in downtown LA. And it was so great because like all the students connected. And I was like,
it's great.
Why have they not? This is another thing where networking should be happening. And it took a small little, get together for these folks to kind of, connect. And they got to see such different sides of what each school kind of, specializes in a little bit and a little bit different in their ways. It was really, really awesome. So we're gonna have to have a follow up and get them together one time. That'd be great.
Yes.
Maybe at next Max because it'll be back here.
Oh, good. Okay, it's not in Miami. I was like, oh, no. God, no. Yeah.
That was a tough. Yeah, that was like, oh my God, that week was gone. It was like
a hurricane, and then they're like, we're still having it, and it's like, okay, yeah.
The day before, come on board. It's all everything's clear.
I'm like, that's a little scary, but yeah. So you can find me there, and then DM me, and I will DM back always. And
awesome.
Yeah, I love it. So love to
cool.
connect.
We'll have all that down there at the bottom for sure as well.
Awesome.
But thanks for reaching out, and I'm glad we were able to do this fun little topic for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much
it.
for having me.
Thanks.
Yeah.